everybody, it's Romania Black, and we are on chapters 66 through 68 of Scum Villain! I'm so excited! So I'm very excited for a lot of reasons. This is going to be a long introduction, so I hope you're ready. There are a lot of comments to go through. There's a lot of feral fan art, and I'm just really excited because when we last left off, Luo Binghe's dad thinks that Shen QingQiu and Luo Binghe and Zhu Xilong have been in a threesome, which is not exactly what's happened. Liu QingGe has shown up to gallantly stride in on his white sword to save Shen QingQiu, and Luo Binghe's not having it, and Shen QingQiu didn't want any of this. So I'm wearing the shirt, by the way, that my moderator for this series, Be Happy, got me this shirt, and I'm so excited. I had recorded ahead, so there wasn't a time where I could have wore it before I got it, but now that I have it, I'm like, oh, look at this! So I'm super excited. I will try to, obviously, I do laundry, so I'm not going to guarantee I'm going to wear this every week, but I felt like it was really appropriate this week to wear it because Shen QingQiu's in a quite a pickle, so to speak. So speaking of which, we have a lot to talk about. We might as well go through and just talk about the comments first and then dive into the feral fandom, and then we'll get into these chapters. So like I said, long introduction. I want to go ahead and start out by talking about Tafe Javde, 2592. Sorry, I probably said that horribly wrong. Talked about how in Xinyan, in the dream realm, even though he has his body and the 2.0 mushroom form, he still imagines himself as Shen QingQiu. The time spent in that body, to me, I was like, I thought that was interesting. He could have appeared to Luo Binghe in any form, but he chooses Shen QingQiu. So for me, that kind of signals that not only the time he spent as Shen QingQiu in this story so far, he'd gotten accustomed to it and everything, but Shen QingQiu is kind of a wall that he's created for himself. He doesn't have to be himself because he's playing Shen QingQiu. So with everything that's happened in the story so far, I'm like, is this going to be a sign that Shen QingQiu is going to become his new self? Like, if he didn't feel confident, like, expressing his sexuality or anything like that as Xinyan, is Shen QingQiu going to be the vessel that will allow him to do that? That could be. So I thought that was interesting. Rhett the Best talks about Shen QingQiu's self-denial at his sexuality, covers himself up. He blames Shang Qinghua for making Luo Binghe gay rather than taking any ownership that his kindness to Luo Binghe helped Luo Binghe to embrace his sexuality because that would make Shen QingQiu vulnerable. Yeah, MXTX is doing a lot with the stallion novel trope and the idea of toxic masculinity and the idea of basically not wanting to admit any type of stray away from the masculine stereotype because that would make you vulnerable. And Shen QingQiu, if we know anything about Shen QingQiu, he doesn't like being vulnerable. And that's kind of what's been going on with this novel. So I thought that was good to point out. Rizurizu 2392 notes that Xinyan knew how unfavored Shen QingQiu was in the OG novel. So he was trying all he could to course correct while thinking he would not have any impact on Luo Binghe, aka he'll be fine. And he wasn't aiming to basically woo anyone romantically, whereas it's the opposite sort of situation with Luo Binghe. Luo Binghe had no idea he was this favored golden child in the original novel because he doesn't know about the original novel. So his open love for Shen QingQiu has led people to have reserved feelings about his actions. And I felt like this entire comment that they were talking about, it's basically talking about how social stereotypes of being accepted, it's like Luo Binghe, in the OG novel was being accepted by everybody and had all this OP power, but he was miserable, right? Versus opening up and being yourself at the risk of being ostracized. And that's kind of the big conflict between Luo Binghe and Shen QingQiu. Xinyan knew the end result of Shen QingQiu in the original novel and was like, oh, we don't want that. So he's been trying everything he can to avoid that ending up until, volume 3 and all this is going down. Whereas Luo Binghe hasn't had any idea. So it's so interesting the two different ways these characters have gone about things and how complicated it's made everything, right? SQQ LBH 314 notes that real gar is a Chinese antidote that you could sprinkle around your house to ward off snakes, which ties into the Realgar wine episode. Apparently, according to the White Snake legend, one of the great 4 folk tales, which, knowing how MXTX has tied in the 4 great tales in Heaven Official's Blessing, I thought that was really cool. The monk Fa Hai advised Zhu Zhan to give Realgar to his wife Bai Zushin, revealing her to be a giant white snake. Realgar is thought to mainly affect cobras or snakes that hunt through smell, since it's an arsenic compound with a very pungent smell, and the wine makes that smell all the more stronger. So apparently Zhu Xilong is one of those snakes that hunts by smell. So, you know, I thought that was really clever. I like when mangaka and authors take real world like science or historical things and kind of apply them in interesting ways. I thought that was neat. And then Anime Annie points out that Zhu Xilong could technically be considered a version of Death of the Author, where I kind of added to Anime Annie's comment where they were like, well, Zhu Xilong's kind of like Death of the Author, where we've presented this character that's not really in the story and they've kind of taken on a life of their own, kind of like Tianlong Jun. My thing is, from what Shen QingQiu had wrote, Airplane Shooting Towards the Sky had wrote, the word loyal was really the only thing attached to Zhu Xilong. So this trait of loyalty is not really developed in the story. So it just becomes like the central trait of Zhu Xilong, and it just kind of goes wild from there. It's really out of Shen QingQiu's hands. Shen QingQiu doesn't have the same outlook as other demon or cultivators. I thought this other part that Anime Annie pointed out was really, really interesting and very important considering the chapters we just had. So, Shen QingQiu doesn't have the same outlook as other demons or cultivators about everyday mortals. There's the brothel girls in the Realgar scene where he considers them like on the same level as him. There is the people in the bar when he came back in his mushroom form that he saved. There's also the people that he was protecting during the Immortal Alliance conference when everyone wanted to open up the barriers, and Shen QingQiu was like, no, that's going to hurt all the everyday people that aren't able to protect themselves. So when we had a few chapters ago where Shen QingQiu's like, hey, your dad's trying to destroy the world and this is going to hurt all these everyday people. We need to stop him. And Luo Binghe was like, well, are you just caring about Sangzhong Mountain sect? And Shen QingQiu's like, what are you talking about? That makes much more sense because, yeah, no, Shen QingQiu does want to protect all of the world from Tianlong Jun's plans. He's not just caring about Sangzhong Mountain sect. Luo Binghe is just jealous. So, and I'm sure that Liu QingGe showing up is in no way, shape, or form going to complicate that in any way. So I really appreciate all those comments. Those were great. Y'all keep sending in your comments. I will get to them, I promise. Even if it takes me a little bit of time after you all have read those chapters, I will get to them. But I want to talk about the Feral fandom because it's been a while and there's been a lot of Feral fan art pop up in the last couple of weeks. So here we have as Gabadoodle points out, him. I love this little cucumber Shen QingQiu. The bangs are what gets me. The fan is cute, but the bangs made out of the little tendrils are just, that part gets me a lot. I cannot. And then this one, this is probably going to be in the thumbnail. Shizun, where are my balls? Luo Binghe is this terrifying dog. That image of Shen QingQiu is me around all of the Luo Binghe stands. That's me every time someone defends Luo Binghe from Volume 2. That's just me just like, stop. I love that so much. Then we have this one shared. You have issues. Oh, you noticed. I feel for Shen QingQiu because he's like, what the fudge? Like, what are we even doing? Why? This one I really liked too. This one where it's Zhu Xilong and he's like, you'll live with me in the demon realm. And he's like, for the love of God, get these snakes out of me. I relate to Shen QingQiu on a spiritual level. I really, all the fan art where he's just panicking, I'm like, that's me all the time. So I'm like, I get it. Oh my God. Speaking of which, the beach meme where it's the guy on the beach in different poses, like lamenting and remorsing. This is kind of that version of it, only the Shen QingQiu contemplating life version. I would put this on a thumbnail. This might be in the thumbnail too. we'll just have to see the contents of this chapter set, but in the background faded. It's too perfect, right? It's too perfect. And then I got a couple more. We don't see a lot of Shen Yan fan art where he's in like his human form before he transmigrated into the novel, but I do like this concept of him being like, you know, he's not a Luo Binghe stan, not at all. The plot! And that kind of goes back to, it's easy to forget that we talked about this back in volume 1, but Shen QingQiu was a big Luo Binghe fan. It's just kind of like, he kind of wanted Luo Binghe to himself. He just wasn't, you know, didn't quite realize it, didn't quite realize how into him he was. And then he got mad with all of these, you know, these stupid harem wives. They're not worthy of him. They're not doing it correctly. And it's like, I will be all for Luo Binghe and Shen QingQiu when they can meet on that eye level mutual level. And last chapter said they were so close to making a breakthrough. So close to, like, they had to work it out between the two of them to kind of navigate with Zhu Xilong. And they were so close to having like some real legit communication. And then Liu QingGe shows up and it's like, now's not the time. So the last one I want to show you all was not posted in the Discord. I was on social media this morning and had not posted anything about Scum Villain Self-Saving System. And this little meme popped up being like, remind yourself every day that you're a sexy little pickle with a juicy little booty and you're going to be just fine, baby. I was like, is this Shen QingQiu coded? I'm seeing it in everyday life. This has got to stop. I just thought that was really funny. I was like, that's what Shen QingQiu tells himself every day once him and Luo Binghe get together. So yeah, that's my feral fandom business for the week. But yeah, I'm super excited to dive into chapter 66 through 68. I have no clue. Every week, I think I have an idea of what's going to happen. And MXTX proves me wrong. So Liu QingGe shown up. You would think there's going to be a battle, but as to the results of said battle, I don't know. That's what we're going to find out. So we aren't going to waste any more time. We are going to start chapter 66 through 68 of Scum Villain Self-Saving System. And we're going to do that here in 3, 2, 1. And let's go. Chapter 66. The fight, encircled by a throng of beasts on the plain, immediately became a three-way battle royale. Tianlongjun fought 2. Liu QingGe also fought 2, and Luo Binghe fought 1 and ignored 1 while simultaneously meeting the attacks of 2. Black chi and white light flashed everywhere, and the hum of swords and cries of beasts surged into the skies. Liu QingGe wanted to come to Shen QingQiu's aid, but the circle surrounding him amassed more and more. Chang Lan spun, transforming into a small tornado, and a dozen blood beasts were dragged inside, shredding into thousands of flying droplets of blood. Shen QingQiu yelled, "Close your mouth, don't swallow it!" Liu QingGe didn't need to close his mouth at all, because the blood couldn't touch him in the first place. But Tianlongjun laughed. I had forgotten that Peak Lord Shen was still here. Shen QingQiu had rather wished he'd stayed forgotten. As soon as Tianlongjun remembered him, he was doomed to no longer have a good time. Twisting pains crawled up from his stomach in thickets. Luo Binghe had been the fiercest fighter, with every strike aimed at Tianlongjun. Now his momentum abruptly slowed, and his attention was also divided. Shen QingQiu called out, "Well, keep fighting! Don't mind me!" He neither cried nor shouted, but returned to the tent and dragged Zhu Xilong with him, a smile twisting his face. Now this time, you can't throw yourself in my sword again, can you? Zhu Xilong was helpless. "Oh, Master, immortal Master Shen, and my lord have both granted me great favor. Why must you always put me in difficult situations?" Cold sweat trickled down Shen QingQiu's spine from the pain, and he shot him a perfunctory retort to distract himself. "Well, you certainly separate your debts and grudges very clearly." Every single one of the Demon Realm's public servants were as honestly devoted to their profession as Xiaohualing, never forgetting to evangelize their bosses for a second. Even beneath Shen QingQiu's sword, Zhu Xilong kept cajoling him. "Well, that's right. So, since the 4 major sects use lowly methods to besiege and entrap my lord, one day they must pay. And since my lord said that not one of Shangzhong Mountain, Zhao Hua Monastery, Huahuan Palace, nor Tianli Temple would be spared, not a single one will be spared." When he mentioned Huanhua Palace, Shen QingQiu's heart suddenly clenched. After his escape from Huanhua Palace's water prison, he had heard that every one of Huanhua Palace disciples guarding the water prison had been killed, and not even Gongyi Zhao had survived. The blame for this had fallen on Shen QingQiu's head, and in turn, he had slapped it onto Luo Binghe's. All this time on the run, he'd never had the chance to figure out exactly who'd done the deed. Oh my God, was it Zhu Xilong this whole time? Because he was at Huanhua Palace when all this was going down with the corpse. So Zhu Xilong treated Shen QingQiu well because some time ago he had stopped Gongyi Zhao from killing him. So he counted as a benefactor. Conversely to Zhu Xilong, Gongyi Zhao must have been an enemy. Shen QingQiu asked, "Do you remember a person called Gongyi Zhao?" Zhu Xilong thought for a moment. "That Huanhua Palace disciple?" So he did remember. "Some time ago I went to the water prison to meet Immortal Master Shen, but by the time I arrived you were already gone, and only that disciple was left, wandering around alone. The night was dark, and this humble one mistook him for Luo Binghe, and so went to investigate." Shen QingQiu understood. From the back, Gongyi Zhao's figure and silhouette were indeed similar to Luo Binghe's. At first glance, even their faces were subtly similar. So for a period of time, Shen QingQiu had felt especially close to Gongyi Zhao. Oh my God! So what? So you're saying that you felt closer to Gongyi Zhao, not because of Gongyi Zhao, but because he looked like Luo Binghe? Shen QingQiu! I feel for Gongyi Zhao a little bit. Zhu Xilong continued later. After I realized that he was the head disciple of Huanhua Palace, who had entered the Mushroom Cave with Immortal Master Shen in Bailu Forest, I killed him on the way out. Killed him on the way out. Zhu Xilong really was a very simple demon, and his uncle said a little foolish. Tan Longjun offered him support so Zhu Xilong would follow him to death. Shen QingQiu inadvertently saved him, so Zhu Xilong had always tried to repay him, albeit by his own logic. Along the same lines, every slight had to be avenged. But Gongyi Zhao's death had been rather profoundly undeserved. He had only been about to kill Zhu Xilong. He hadn't actually done it. When Shen QingQiu had parted with Gongyi Zhao in the water prison, the boy had said, "If we have the fortune to meet again, Senior must keep his promise and bring me to visit Shijing Peak. This junior will be waiting." It was as if these words were still ringing in Shen QingQiu's ear. Oh my God! Oh no! Shen QingQiu found it hard to look directly at Zhu Xilong. The ease with which he had looked at him previously was already gone. Zhu Xilong had just noticed this change when Shen QingQiu stood up and walked off. Zhu Xilong was surprised. "Where are you going?" "Wherever, as long as it's far away," said Shen QingQiu. Heavenly demons were all lunatics. Being with one lunatic had to be better than being with two. At least that one listened to him. Oh my God, yeah! Zhu Xilong looked like he'd been stabbed. "Well, I just want to treat the people who've helped me well," he said quickly. "Is there something wrong with that?" "The problem is that you think what you're doing is treating me well, but I don't think the same," Shen QingQiu said. With every step he took, he felt his blood vessels twitching, like thousands and thousands of insects were squirming and biting within them. Luo Binghe looked back at him, and again, only barely avoiding being struck several times. Zhu Xilong raised his voice. "Well, even if Immortal Master Shen will meet a miserable end, he would still insist on taking their side?" Shen QingQiu didn't answer, but he just kept walking. At the sight of this, Zhu Xilong said quietly, "I understand." Just after these words left his mouth, the dull pain within Shen QingQiu's body disappeared. Tian Longjun's voice rose, carrying a hint of irritation. "What are you doing?" Of everyone present, only the heavenly demons knew what was going on. Shen QingQiu's body had 3 sets of blood mites within it, and Luo Binghe had been fighting 1-on-2 at a slight disadvantage. But just then, Zhu Xilong had stopped inciting his blood mites to fight against Luo Binghe's, and instead changed sides to join hands with Luo Binghe to suppress Tian Longjun's blood. If it hurt no longer, what did he have to fear? Shen QingQiu drew Zhu Ya and leapt onto his sword and yelled, "Liu Shidi, let's go!" Seeing him fly in his direction, Liu QingGe also flipped atop Cheng Luan. Tianlongjun finally stopped playing around with his blood and attacked with a palm strike, billowing with demonic chi, only to be parried by Luo Binghe. As Shen QingQiu passed by, he reached out, to grab Luo Binghe, and Luo Binghe raised his own arm in return. In a seamless sequence of movements, their hands connected, and with a pull, Shen QingQiu brought Luo Binghe onto Zhuya. 2 sets of sword glares shot off towards the horizon. Oh, I thought for a second he was gonna leave Luo Binghe there with them and just go off with Liu QingGe. And I was like, Shen QingQiu, especially after what you've learned and knowing that it wasn't Luo Binghe's fault, you better take him with you. So, oh good. Wails and cries echoed all over and across the plain. Tianlongjun snapped his fingers, and the remaining several dozen blood beasts lost their power. Their skin, fur, and fangs rapidly melted. Before long, they turned into a splatter of blood droplets and soaked into the ground. He looked at Zhu Xilong, letting them go just like that. Zhu Xilong didn't say a word, going down on one knee. Tianlongjun possessed admirable composure, and his anger only persisted for a moment before it passed. You went to all that trouble, yet he didn't appreciate it a bit, only wholeheartedly rushed down to the road to ruin. Zhu Xilong, your lord is sympathetic. Motioning for Zhu Xilong to get up, he casually remarked, but there's no need to be upset. One day, Peak Lord Shen will understand you are doing what is best for him. A day not far from this one. Oh my god! Looking again at the night horizon, Tianlongjun said, but I never really imagined. To think that Peak Lord Shen likes it with more people! Does there need to be at least 3 every time? Silence reigned. Zhu Xilong's heart, originally turbulent, instantly became a wind-ravaged wasteland, absent a single blade of grass. His lord had probably been reading those strangely illustrated pamphlets from the human realm again. Oh no! Zhu Xilong, why don't you correct him? Why don't you correct him? No! Zhu Xilong, damn it! Oh my god. Oh my god! The trio flew kilometers away, heading straight for the borderlands. Liu QingGe hadn't thought Shen QingQiu would bring Luo Binghe along as well. Well, what'd you grab him for? He snapped. Why are the 2 of you together? Luo Binghe and Liu QingGe had held deep grudges against each other, and Shen QingQiu couldn't properly explain within a short amount of time, so he just said vaguely, there are reasons. I relate so much. When Shen QingQiu didn't refute them being together, Luo Binghe's eyes brightened, and his lips also curved into a smile. Oh, I love that that's what Luo Binghe read into it. Shen QingQiu's like, we don't have time to talk about this. It's a long story. And Luo Binghe's like, he didn't deny we're together. At the sight of him overflowing with joy for no particular reason, Liu QingGe was alarmed and formed a seal with his hand, spiritual energy sparking between his fingers. Shen QingQiu, get over here. Luo Binghe's expression changed faster than a flipped page. He had been all tender affection the moment before, but the next, contempt filled his features, and he tightened his arms around Shen QingQiu's waist. Luo Binghe had already been holding him tight with added force. Shen QingQiu almost couldn't breathe. He slapped Luo Binghe's hands away before saying, Liu Shide, it is indeed somewhat complicated. Let's get away first, and I'll take my time to explain later. Just trust me for now. I trust you, said Liu QingGe, but I don't trust him. I trust him, Shen QingQiu replied without a moment's hesitation. Liu QingGe's brows furrowed and he said harshly, you trusted him before, and how did that end? Luo Binghe's faint smile was like needles hidden within cotton floss. His voice neither cold nor warm. Shizunari said he trusted me. Why are you still wasting your breath? Have you not had enough fighting? Is that how you speak to your Shiju? Said Shen QingQiu. Liu QingGe didn't speak much in the first place, so who was wasting his breath? In fact, he didn't say anything further and instead flung out a spiritual blast. We're flying at a high altitude. Is it fun fighting atop swords? Well, careful, safety first! Shen QingQiu veered slightly off course, but though Luo Binghe should have dodged the blow with his, he let out a muffled groan behind him. Shen QingQiu turned. Well, what is it? Had he really been hit? Luo Binghe shook his head. I'm fine. It doesn't hurt. Reasonably speaking, even if Luo Binghe had been hit, it shouldn't have been a big deal. Shen QingQiu looked him over carefully and noticed that, in fact, a bit of black chi had gathered at the acupoint between his brows. He muttered, well, you don't look so good. After the fight, I was a bit dizzy, but now I'm dizzier, Luo Binghe said softly, his voice weak. But it's nothing really. It's just a spiritual blast. Liu QingGe's urge to face Luo Binghe in a bloody battle to the last grew and grew. How many times had they fought? And now one spiritual blast had him dizzy? Will Shen QingQiu move aside? Shen QingQiu sent him an apologetic smile. Liu Shidi, he was injured earlier and just now only healed. You mustn't stoop to his level. He doesn't know better. If he offended you, I'll apologize for him. There was a dark look on Liu QingGe's face. He made a lot of mistakes before, but he won't from now on. Shen QingQiu continued, I will definitely discipline him properly. Oh! Liu QingGe's face finally turned pale. You really trust him? Shen QingQiu felt a bit guilty. Luo Binghe was still hugging him around the waist with that anxious expression on his face, like he was waiting for Shen QingQiu's reply. To be honest, he'd never genuinely trusted Luo Binghe before, and that was why he kept accidentally hurting him. With the way things were now, I would rather believe that I can than prematurely determine that I cannot, he said. In a household with children who didn't know better, the adults never had it easy. After offering up apologetic explanations, Shen QingQiu turned to compliments. After being apart these many days, it seems Liu Shidi's cultivation has advanced again. Liu QingGe lifted his chin. Well, I just exited seclusion. We'll just change the subject. When Luo Binghe had launched a siege upon Sangzhong Mountain, Liu QingGe had told him, just you wait. Following this, he had indeed gone to cultivate in seclusion. After leaving, he had gone directly to rescue Shen QingQiu. Shen QingQiu rubbed his nose, feeling that a simple thank you seemed insufficient. How did you know to come to the southern border to find me? After Liu QingGe left seclusion, he had rushed at top speed to Luo Binghe's territory on the Demon Realm's northern border and slaughtered his way in, nearly overturning the whole place, only to find that Shen QingQiu was not there. Luo Binghe wasn't there either, having apparently rushed by to give a few instructions before immediately leaving. Liu QingGe had subsequently caught that demoness called Sha whatever to interrogate her. However, Bison Peak's interrogation method simply involved beating up the subject. Oh no! And at the very most involved beating them up in different degrees. Of course, Great Master Liu had some difficulties beating up a woman, and Xia Hualing was also a very difficult woman to deal with, so he hadn't extracted anything from her. Trying to be chivalrous, Liu QingGe. Fortunately, he had then run into Shang Qinghua, who had nothing to do beyond eating his fill and wandering around in boredom all day. Oh, you bitch! Oh my god! Liu QingGe had absolutely no reservations about that guy. But as soon as he raised his fist, Sha Qinghua spilled everything in an unceasing flood, including what Shen QingQiu's diet in the Demon Realm was like, his daily diversions, and the vital information about how Shen QingQiu had been taken to the southern border. Oh, Shang Qinghua, you bitch! After he'd squeezed this out of him, Liu QingGe had planned to execute the traitor on the spot. He hadn't anticipated that as Shang Qinghua hugged his thighs and wailed like a banshee, swearing over and over that he had no choice, that he would turn over a new leaf, his cries would draw Mo Beijun's attention. Oh, not beating the allegations of Mo Beijun wanting to be with Shang Qinghua and this being a thing. Oh my god, what? Liu QingGe and Mo Beijun had subsequently fought, collapsing nearly half of Luo Binghe's underground palace, and this had cost Liu QingGe some time. This violent path of ups and downs was one of Great Master Liu that he had trod over the past few days. Going to such effort and trouble, Liu QingGe was truly more reliable than a blood brother. Oh my god! Shen QingQiu, do you not realize that it's because he likes you? A pun on Liu QingGe's name, since blood brother in Chinese is a near homophone for QingGe. Oh. After Shen QingQiu expresses overwhelming gratitude in his reserved manner, he swapped to a serious tone and changed the subject. Liu Shide, I have business I must discuss with you. Speak. Do you know of Tianlongjun? To the people of the cultivation world, this name was legendary. Years ago, the four major sects had emptied their halls for the battle in which Tianlongjun had been sealed beneath Bailu Mountain. Though the forces of Shangjong Mountain had been one of the main participants, the ones who actually went to battle were the previous generation of Peak Lords. Of the current Peak Lords, only Yu Qingyan had participated in that battle as the head disciple of Shangding Peak. With Zhanzu, his talent had shown, and he'd played a key part. Of course, Liu QingGe was not ignorant of this. the previous saintly ruler of the demon race, his physical body was destroyed 7 or 8 years ago. That his physical body was destroyed does not necessarily mean that he died, said Shen QingQiu. He might have shed his shell and escaped. Liu QingGe raised an eyebrow. Like you? Feeling guilty, Shen QingQiu coughed. Exactly. Liu QingGe didn't pursue the topic, so he escaped, and then Tianlongjun plans to merge the demon and human realms. You mean he plans to attack the human realm? Shen QingQiu had known that most people would easily confuse these concepts. When you said merge, many people would assume that you meant unite, but that actually wasn't the case. What Tianlongjun planned to do with Zhenmo was the literal kind of merge. Oh, man! Oh, well! Oh, this chapter, there's stuff to talk about. Although, I do want to make note, the only thing I could think of as we were going through this was, is this moment from the beginning, is that what we're talking about with them escaping? And now we have Shen QingQiu being held by Luo Binghe? It wasn't, you couldn't see Liu QingGe, so of course it wasn't revealed, but maybe, possibly. Okay! Chapter 67. The demon and human realms were like two sides of the same sheet of paper, existing in two different dimensions. If you drew a line on one side of the paper, no matter how you extended it, you wouldn't end up on the other side. But Zhenmo could pierce the two sides of the sheet and render them to one surface. So let's offer an example. The human realm mainland had a river called the Luo, and the demon realm had the Maigu Ridge. These two places were located in different dimensions, but in the original work, after Luo Binghe used Zhenmo as a key to merge the two realms, Maigu Ridge was patched into the center of the Luo River and became an isolated island. Oh, so it's basically like kind of like the upside down in Stranger Things, where it's the same world, just the reverse of it. So if you merge them, then the things on this side of the world is going to appear, they're going to merge together and be united in the same area. Oh, okay. After receiving this simple explanation, Liu QingGe furrowed his brow. Is such a thing really possible? Of course. The original Luo Binghe succeeded at it. Shen QingQiu nodded gravely. Liu QingGe thought and said, well, this will have serious consequences. You'll need more evidence to convict the sect leaders. If evidence was what was needed, he really didn't have any. Shen QingQiu was starting to get a headache when Luo Binghe, who'd gone quiet for a while, suddenly spoke. Why doesn't Shizun ask me? Liu QingGe replied before Shen QingQiu could with a t. There were plenty of reasons for that t. Luo Binghe had demon blood, and he had long since dropped all pretenses with the sects. He was infamous across the land, and he had turned Huanhua Palace into a straight-up heretic cult. Though its power had not weakened but grown under his hand, the other great sects had exiled the palace from their ranks, and its status as a renowned righteous sect was only truly in name. Of course, in that case, Luo Binghe could be of no help, so there probably wasn't any reason to ask him. Though Shen QingQiu understood this in his heart, he couldn't say so too frankly. He didn't know whether Luo Binghe's fragile glass heart would subsequently shatter. He let out a few awkward laughs, but before he finished, a small bit of extra weight suddenly pressed against his back. Luo Binghe's head leaned lightly on his left shoulder. Shen QingQiu thought he was just acting cute again and tried to shake him off, but when he looked closer, Luo Binghe's eyes were closed in peaceful sleep. He'd fallen asleep while standing. Well, weren't you chatting perfectly fine just now? Shen QingQiu reached behind him and took firm hold of Luo Binghe's arm to keep him from falling off the sword. Luo Binghe, he called quietly. No reaction. After a pause, Shen QingQiu used a lower and quieter voice. Binghe. Only after being called twice did he slowly open his eyes. At the sight of his unfocused gaze, Shen QingQiu couldn't resist asking, are you really that tired? It was only a few days since the Holy Mausoleum, and even if the wounds Luo Binghe had suffered had healed quickly, they'd still likely left some lingering effects. Passing out now and then couldn't be considered surprising. Luo Binghe shook his head. I'm not. Shen QingQiu thought it over and then turned towards Liu QingGe, who was watching them with crossed arms and a cold glare. Liu Shide, after we cross the borderlands, why don't you go on ahead? Why don't you go? Oh my God, are you kidding? Go back to Sangzhong Mountain and summon the sects for discussion with Zhang Minxiang and the others. Liu QingGe's eyes widened slightly. And you? I may be back a bit later. Shen QingQiu said, with Binghe like this, the way I see it. It would be best to rest a bit before we continue. Liu QingGe drew a deep breath. I came to bring you back. Shen QingQiu hesitated while Luo Binghe didn't say a word and only kept his head down, looking extremely docile. Is it an act? Just one night, said Shen QingQiu. Liu QingGe looked at Luo Binghe tucked behind Shen QingQiu's back and snapped, not even a night. Well, then what could he do? Another 2 hours, the trio crossed the borderlands and stopped before the largest inn in the city. The city was far from the Central Plains. There were plenty of local miscellaneous sects, but since spirited and handsome personages with such lofty, awe-inspiring, immortal demeanors were rarely seen, and 3 of them had shown up at once, each more handsome than the last, quite a few people paused to observe. Liu QingGe lifted his chin and strode forward in long steps, Changlong in hand, leading the way across the threshold. Oh my god! The main hall was luxurious, spacious, and bright, and the host immediately appeared to greet him. Oh, Liu QingGe, are you really going to stay with us? Asked Shen QingQiu. Well, this is not going to beat Tianlong Jun's allegations at all. He'd always had the feeling that Liu QingGe was the type to place himself above the troubles of the mortal world, who didn't need sleep at all, and even if he did sleep, he would do so on a spirit platform veiled by lingering clouds. Liu QingGe crossed his arms, sword in hand, and said icily, I'm concerned. When he looked up, he just managed to catch Luo Binghe silently scoffing behind Shen QingQiu! So was this an act? Was Luo Binghe trying to get Shen QingQiu alone so he could mess with him? And Liu QingGe's like, Then Luo Binghe's gaze slid sideways, a disdainful smile on his lips, his gaze overflowing with malice. He was! Enraged, the veins on his hand with which Liu QingGe held Changlong began to pop. At the sight of this, Shen QingQiu hurriedly said, well, if you have something to say, just say it. Don't get angry. Then he looked back only to see Luo Binghe giving him an innocent blink. Oh my god! Lips still pale! Luo Binghe, quit it! Quit it! Now quit being fake. Come on now. Good customers, are you here to stay the night? The host said with a smile. Liu QingGe ignored the host. Luo Binghe looked like he would fall over at any moment, so Shen QingQiu could only take charge of the exchange himself. Well, that's right, he said. How many rooms? 3, says Shen QingQiu. 2, said Luo Binghe. Liu QingGe stopped just shy of writing, a wolf's treacherous ambitions deserve both hatred and execution on his own face. 2 rooms, please, Luo Binghe repeated pleasantly. Thank you. 3 rooms, said Liu QingGe. Luo Binghe smiled. May I ask who's paying? Both Shen QingQiu and Liu QingGe froze. There was no need to suggest. Shen QingQiu, he had just escaped a demon's lair. Why would he have something like money? Liu QingGe was even more out of the question. This sort of master who was above the troubles of mortal worlds, who had slaughtered his whole way here, would never remember to bring cash with him. It's me, Luo Binghe said deliberately, and I didn't bring enough money. So 2 rooms. Liu QingGe, don't bicker with him, said Shen QingQiu. I'm surprised he didn't say 1 room and just stick the 3 of them together. I'm surprised that Shen QingQiu didn't go, if it wasn't 3 with Liu QingGe, 2 with Luo Binghe, and Shen QingQiu's like, let's just do 1 room and y'all can't bitch. I'm surprised it didn't work out that way. There really was no telling whether Luo Binghe had done this on purpose. By now, Shen QingQiu really didn't dare to assume. Fair! If money was the issue, there truly was no way to resolve it. If he didn't have the funds, they couldn't just pawn off Zhuya or Qinlong, now could they? After receiving the tokens for their rooms, Liu QingGe led the way upstairs as Shen QingQiu walked in the middle. He turned and said helplessly, if you anger your Shishu again, next time I'm selling you for money. Luo Binghe looked up. Shizun, you're always so merciless with me. Ahead of them, Liu QingGe turned back and wrinkled his nose, looking like he wanted to hack these 2 degenerates to death, filled with enough disgust to bury one on a mountain peak and the other at the bottom of the ocean. The 2 rooms were right next to each other, and the distribution of occupants was a serious problem. Liu QingGe had his own considerations. Luo Binghe's character and actions were uniformly bizarre, and an evil hung about him. He had embraced a corpse for 5 years. And now Luo Binghe was standing before him in the flesh. Could he just let him have his way? Sparks crackled through the air. Calm and unruffled, Shen QingQiu opened a door, turned and closed it behind him. Oh! Then he suddenly opened a crack and said solemnly, well, you 2 get some rest! The sparks froze into ice. Well, hey, said Liu QingGe. The space between the Luo Binghe's brows particularly darkened into a black cloud. Shizun, he'll kill me. Shen QingQiu raised a finger at Liu QingGe. Well, go ahead and fight, just don't kill him. Yeah, right. Like he dare share a room with Luo Binghe. A straight man and a gay one staying in the same room? Well, that was just asking for death. Yes. Shen QingQiu insisted that he was still straight. His willingness to read a stallion novel like Proud Immortal Demon Ray was rock-solid proof. Oh, well, bitch, no! You're saying that that's your reason? Oh, my God. No, well, what happens? What happens if Shen Qinghua... I maintain my theory that Shen Qinghua is going to at some point reveal that he was originally wanting this to be a Danmai and changed it up because of the fan comments. And if that happens, then that excuse that Shen QingQiu has is gone. So... Nor did he dare to share a room with Liu QingGe. Though Great Master Liu was Sangjiang Mountain's #1 straight man across all of time and space, so straight that it was evident to all the heavens and earth, his straightness as certain as the fact of the light of the sun and moon. What? If the demonic vinegar vat that was Luo Binghe overturned his sour contents, he'd be even harder to deal with. In Chinese, drinking vinegar was a euphemism for being jealous. So, oh my God. I love that he's just like, oh yes, of course, Liu QingGe is totally straight. Of course he's straight. Like, why wouldn't he? But I don't want, I don't want to, what if I'm wrong? For the above reasons, Shen QingQiu happily said, then it's decided. Luo Binghe was about to weep. Well, Shizun, how can you bear to do this? Shen QingQiu chuckled and resolutely closed the door, leaving the two petrified in the corridor, charred without and tinder within. He had decided to find some place to rest because Luo Binghe looked tired and weak, but looking at him now, didn't he seem quite healthy? He'd worried for nothing. He's like, nice try, bitch! You're not gonna fool me! Damn it, I kind of wanted them to end up being together, so that sucks. If only to talk some more. After bathing, Shen QingQiu changed into his clean inner robes. Bored and with nothing to do, he spotted a few thin booklets stacked on the low table. Each had gaudy covers, and he really couldn't read the titles, but they were marked with numbers 1, 2, and 3. So he pulled one out and leaned back against the headboard to read. Skimming through the lines 10 at a time, he found the text full of ornate prose and sentimental descriptions, and it even came with exquisite illustrations. Shen QingQiu was about to take a closer look when that long-absent system notification came chirping at him. Hello, notification number 1. Satisfaction points exceed threshold. Drop conditions for key item achieved. Please prepare to receive. If the item is not withdrawn during the drop period, it will expire. A key item. That fake Jade Guanyin could reduce up to 5,000 anchor points. Shen QingQiu tossed the booklet in his hands aside. Well, now, wait a minute. Satisfaction points exceed threshold. Drop conditions achieved for keyed item achieved. Are you saying that before, as I had reached a certain amount of satisfaction points, the key item wasn't even usable? Correct. Well, then what the hell had been the point of asking him whether he wanted to use it before? If he activated it without having met the prerequisite conditions, wouldn't he have had to use the small scenario pusher anyway? And there wasn't really a use for the item anymore, was there? Shen QingQiu sincerely believed that henceforth, even if he didn't get gay with Luo Binghe, oh my God, gay with Luo Binghe, stop. As long as he didn't get gay with anyone else, why are you even considering that? You said you were straight. The protagonist's anger points wouldn't explode. Even if you shoved Luo Binghe to the ground and tried to beat him to death, the only point value that would increase would be his satisfaction. Notification number 2. High energy ahead. An important quest is about to appear at Zhao Hua Monastery. Please be prepared to accept it and have a good one. This is a meme from the Chinese version of Mobile Suit Gundam. Playing off the line high level energy reaction detection ahead, people often leave it as a bullet comment when something exciting is about to happen in a show or video. Version 2.0 even came with a high energy ahead notification. Come to think of it, Luo Binghe had occasionally been exceedingly intimate with Shen QingQiu, but his satisfaction points had never increased. Shen QingQiu had been confused by this. This wasn't him being narcissistic, it was Just that with Luo Binghe's sorry tendency of raking in satisfaction points from every single glare, scolding, or beating, it really was unscientific that they hadn't doubled by now. Had Shen QingQiu just failed to hear or otherwise missed notifications? When he opened the system's database, the satisfaction points really hadn't increased by much. When he asked about this, the system said, because the satisfaction points has recently increased with excessive frequency, satisfaction points will be calculated monthly in order to conserve system resources. Have a good one! Calculated monthly? Shen QingQiu had a premonition that it would be a terrifying number. He was just about to ponder whether any important plot points occurred at Zhao Hua Monastery around this time when someone lightly knocked on the door. Oh, okay, well, we got one more chapter. Oh my god, Origins. Oh, part 18. Oh, thank goodness. Well, we're not even to chapter 68 yet, so good deal. Shen QingQiu's first assumption was that it was definitely Luo Binghe. But when the newcomer walked in, he realized he'd overestimated himself this time. The one who actually walked in was Liu QingGe. Didn't Liu QingGe always prefer to walk straight in over the door after kicking it down? Since when did he learn to knock? In any case, the straight man could be allowed to come inside. Oh my god, stop! Shen QingQiu stepped aside to let him pass and closed the door and asked, well, why did Liu QingGe come calling in the middle of the night? Where's Luo Binghe? Liu QingGe's face was stony. I don't know. His expression said clearly he'd rather sleep on the roof than share a room with the little beast. Shen QingQiu internally rolled with laughter. Liu QingGe shot him a glare and then reached into his lapels and pulled something out and tossed it to him. Shen QingQiu caught it and saw it was one of the old folding fans they had left in Xi Jinping's bamboo house. Shen QingQiu couldn't resist the urge to spread it with a sharp swish, and the resulting cool breeze immediately made him feel more lively and refreshed. A folding fan really was a deadly weapon when it came to acting badass. He could feel his B-points explosively surging by the second. Moved, he said, "Oh, Shidi, to think you remembered to bring this for Xizhong." But of course, Liu QingGe wasn't here just to give him the fan. He picked a stool and sat on it, ramrod straight, placing only one arm on the table. "I have something to say to you." Affected by his mood, Shen QingQiu also grew serious and straightened his back. "Well, what exactly is up with you and Luo Binghe?" asked Liu QingGe. The Bison Peak Lord definitely wasn't asking this because he was looking to gossip. Shen QingQiu, considering his wording for a moment, then said sincerely, "I'm not so sure myself. By the time I realized it, things had already become as they are." "You sincerely believe that he's changed his ways?" "It's not so much that he's changed his ways as I seem to have misunderstood him from the start." Liu QingGe sneered. "Misunderstood? He forced you to self-detonate. He tormented Huanhua Palace. He laid siege to Sangzhong Mountain, burned and smashed Xianding Pal, and injured Sangjin Xiang. Were all those misunderstandings?" Upon hearing the last part, Shen QingQiu immediately asked, "Is Zheng Manxiang all right? He looked to be injured last time. Has Mu Shidi treated him well? Was it really Luo Binghe who did it?" "Well, who else could it have been?" Liu QingGe spat. "Are you still looking for excuses for him? You've lost your senses." No, he wasn't looking for excuses for Luo Binghe, but rather he was genuinely unsure as to whether Luo Binghe could injure Yu Qingyang so easily. It must have been known that Luo Binghe and Yu Qingyang had fought head-to-head several times in proud immortal demon way. And not once had Luo Binghe gotten the better of the sect leader. In the end, he had needed to use the original flavor, Shen QingQiu, to drive that sect leader to his horrific death, pierced through by 10,000 arrows. Oh, come to think of it, in both the original work and in this world, Yu Qingyang had truly treated Shen QingQiu unusually well. Shen QingQiu had been perplexed by this since early in the novel. Why did the great leader of a righteous sect bestow such favor on a scum villain of all people? Were there undiscovered hidden depths of this relationship? Would it be one of his plot-holing, filling responsibilities? Now look here, novel! Look here! You had me convinced from day one that the dare officer was fine, and now you're bringing back in suspicion? Now you're making me suspicious of him again? What? No! Chapter 68. Bitch, what? Shen QingQiu lowered his head, deep in thought, but Liu QingGe thought he was expressing shame after the scolding, and his face relaxed, his tone no longer so severe. None of our comrades understand. Why are you so good to him? Liu QingGe leaned forward just a bit, and the candlelight painted a layer of warmth over his snow-pale face. Tense, he asked, or to say, are the rumors true? The Shen QingQiu who had believed Great Master Liu would scoff and turn up his nose at the gossip was far too sweet and innocent. Shen QingQiu's hand clenched around his fan, so Liu QingGe also believes that baseless hearsay. Liu QingGe straightened again. I don't. Yet you only care to blindly defend that traitor. I'm not blindly defending him. Shen QingQiu said helplessly. I just don't want to misunderstand him again. Well, I don't understand, Liu QingGe said coldly. Either way, mountains may crumble and rivers may shift, but fundamental nature is difficult to change. Luo Binghe is no good news. You'd better look out for yourself. After he finished, he got up and made to leave. Of course, Shen QingQiu too knew that Luo Binghe was no good news. But at present, he couldn't be certain that he was wicked either. It was still a headache. Meanwhile, as Liu QingGe was about to walk out the door, he passed that low table and glanced down. His next step slipped out from under him, as if he had spotted something extraordinary. Shen QingQiu looked up. As Liu QingGe still hadn't left, he sensed something was off. Well, what is it? Liu QingGe stiffly turned his head and looked him up and down with the complicated gaze of someone who had seen something entirely new. After a while, he shook his head, and only then did he open the door to leave. Within these short couple of steps, he seemed to even trip over the threshold. What exactly is it? Were the books that he was going to read porn, and that's like gay porn, and that's what it was? Shen QingQiu snoozed away soundly all night. The next morning, half dreaming and half awake, he sensed someone else in the room. This person's steps and movements both were incredibly light. Was it Luo Binghe? When Shen QingQiu opened his eyes, he immediately froze. The only one who'd been interested in slipping into his room the first thing in the morning was obviously Luo Binghe. But it was a very different Luo Binghe. He changed into a set of white robes. His dark hair was neatly bound in a light-colored ribbon. And furthermore, he was hurrying about the room with a relaxed and contented expression. His current attire and appearance was exactly identical to the Luo Binghe from before the Immortal Alliance Conference, the model of a flawless and pure disciple of a major sect, the image of a pretty, diligent, and competent young wife. Why is that marked down? What? Luo Binghe turned. At the sight of Shen QingQiu propping himself up on one arm, he reached out a hand and said, all smiles, oh, Shizun is awake, breakfast is on the table. Is he dreaming? Shen QingQiu put a hand on his forehead, but his body reacted by itself to take Luo Binghe's hand and get off the bed. If he had to blame something, it would be that scene before him was precisely the standard service he had received every morning back on Xijing Peak in days long past. The whole breadth of morning activities, getting up, getting dressed, washing, doing his hair, serving the meal, eating, was all naturally done under the auspice of Luo Binghe's mindful service. If the setting were changed to Xijing Peak's bamboo house, he really would have had a terrifying misconception that time was flowing backwards. This inn's breakfast is frankly unpalatable, said Luo Binghe. Shizun will have to settle. If he was to be compared with Luo Binghe's handiwork, then this critique was very objective. Shen QingQiu asked, well, where is your shishu? I don't know, said Luo Binghe with a smile. Whenever one of those two mentioned the other, it was with these blunt and simple 3 words. Shen QingQiu pretty much got the idea. There was no point in asking. In a flash, Luo Binghe had gone to make his bed. The devil incarnate, making his bed! This too was a fantastical vision. Shen QingQiu didn't dare watch. Out of nowhere, Luo Binghe spoke again. But if Shizun is allowing me to call Liu QingGe Shishu, that means he still acknowledges me as a disciple of Xijing Peak. Well, duh, how many times have you chased me around calling me Shizun this, Shizun that? Well, since when has this master said you were no longer a disciple? Said Shen QingQiu. I thought Shizun had tacitly driven me from the sect long ago, said Luo Binghe as he folded the sheets. I always chased after you, calling Shizun, but in fact I was deeply afraid that it was just my one-sided wishful thinking. Shen QingQiu couldn't take it anymore. He covered his face. Well, have some backbone, won't you, Binghe? You're the top-shelf stallion protagonist who once stood before his harem, oppressive presence overflowing as he coolly declared things like, I do have this many women, and there's going to be more. Deal with it or get lost. Who exactly is this pure-hearted young man who serves tea and carries water and washes clothes and folds blanket for someone, who bashfully speaks only when his back is turned, huh? Who's possessing your body? Shen QingQiu finally had another opportunity to lecture his disciple. He drank a mouthful of tea and then said, well, it's very good that you think this way. Since you know you're still a disciple of Xi Jinping, then you must not be as disrespectful as you have been to all your Shishu and Shibo, especially when we return to Sangzhong Mountain today. You must give a proper apology for laying siege to the mountain and ruining the hall the last time you were here. Of course, he didn't mean it only as a verbal apology. Luo Binghe would definitely have to pay the original construction costs for all the public facilities he had destroyed as compensation. There'd be bare minimum to demonstrate sincerity. Luo Binghe whisked away the breakfast dishes as he carelessly said, well, there's no need to return to Sangzhong Mountain today. Said Shen QingQiu. What did you say? I said, if Shizun really wants to see all those Shishu and Shibo, we don't need to return to Sangzhong Mountain. We can change directions and head straight to Zhao Hua Monastery. When the 3 words Zhao Hua Monastery left Luo Binghe's mouth, the system sent a notification. Zhao Hua Monastery quest officially issued. Issuer Luo Binghe, please select whether to accept. The quest issuer was actually Luo Binghe himself? Shen QingQiu squinted. Well, how do you know? Won't Shizun know if he goes? Said Luo Binghe. Meanwhile, Liu Shishu still hasn't returned. Right after the words left his mouth, Liu QingGe arrived, kicking the door open with a bang! The door fell flat on the ground, but Shen QingQiu actually felt this was the style and entrance method that Liu QingGe should normally have, so his expression so much didn't as flicker. Liu QingGe didn't spare Luo Binghe even a single glance as he said to Shen QingQiu, change of plans. We're not returning to Sangzhong Mountain today. We're going to Zhao Hua Monastery. Shen QingQiu stood. Did something happen? Something happened. Liu QingGe echoed gravely. The news came after midnight last night. Today, the leaders of many sects are going to Zhao Hua Monastery on their invitation to discuss. Sangzhong Mountain sect is included. The cultivator families of the city have already made preparations and departed. On the way to Zhao Hua Monastery, they passed by Jinlan City. It had been a few years, but who knew this once prosperous merchant capital looked like now after the calamity? If they hadn't been in such a hurry, Shen QingQiu would definitely have flown through a thick layer of clouds to take a look. Oh, so they didn't get to see it. Oh, damn it. Also, weird. Luo Binghe acting like an NPC from a novel. It's very strange. Not long after passing Jinlan City, they arrived at Zhao Hua Monastery. Is this a dream or not a dream? It feels like a dream, but I don't think that it is. It feels... Luo Binghe felt too innocent in this. It feels like a dream. Maybe it's not. Maybe we'll see. The treasured monastery was dignified and stately, seated halfway up a verdant ancient mountain. Like, how did Luo Binghe know they were going to go there? And then Liu QingGe suddenly magically appeared. This feels weird. The originally quiet and secluded old monastery was now a boiling cauldron of voices and darting silhouettes, and an unceasing parade of flying swords in formation poured in and out of the mountainside. The trio stopped at the bottom of the flight of stone stairs leading to the Hall of Great Strength, which is known as the Mahavira Hall. This is the main hall in the tradition of Buddhist temples. Come with me to see Zhang Minxiang, Liu QingGe said to Shen QingQiu. Shen QingQiu was just about to nod when Luo Binghe also walked up to them. His status was special, and this was a rather sensitive situation. So Shen QingQiu said, go lie low for a bit. Don't give the sect leaders the chance to point their spears at you. If they want to point, they can, said Luo Binghe uncaring. Of course I will go with Shizun. Once again, he was refusing to listen. If Shen QingQiu really let him follow along and he was recognized, there would be a great deal of unnecessary trouble. Liu Shidi, you go first. I'll come later, said Shen QingQiu. Liu QingGe gave them a cold look before he flew up the stairs, heading off to rendezvous with Sangzhong Mountain. As long as he intentionally restrained his presence and adjusted his expression, Luo Binghe could make himself look harmless. Amidst the jostling crowd, he managed to appear to be a good, upright youth, albeit one with a somewhat excessively good-looking face, which made it difficult to avoid drawing attention. As for Shen QingQiu, aside from his rather unfortunate appearance in Jinlan City, he'd been buried in the ground and not shown his face for years, so the chance of him being recognized was even smaller. The area outside the hall, as well as the plaza, were packed with rings and rings of people, forming a human wall. Before, the most numerous and arrogant among them would definitely have been the disciples of Huanhua Palace, but now that Huanhua Palace had become a heretic cult in all but name, they were naturally excluded. They hadn't received an invitation in the first place, and not a single one of them was to be seen. Several of the Zhao Hua Monastery abbots presided over the occasion from the center of the Hall of Great Strength. Even Master Wu Qin was among them. Only when Shen QingQiu looked closer did he discover that both of the man's lower legs were wooden prosthetics, which allowed him to stand and walk as he once had. Shangzhong Mountain Sect, with Liu QingGe as its head, sat to the side of the wall, watching with a solemn and respectful gaze. Liu QingGe had just arrived to stand behind Liu QingGe and leaned down to whisper a few words into his ears. Liu QingGe's expression stirred, and he inclined his head slightly, looking all around. Beside Master Wu Qin was the head of the Zhao Hua Monastery, Abbot Wu Wang. This old monk, beard and brows peppered with white, pressed his palms together, his low, deep voice echoing throughout the hall loud and clear. This old monk will ask outright, all who are present, how many of you had the same dream last night? Dream? Needless to say, this was Luo Binghe's doing. Said perpetrator whispered in Shen QingQiu's ear, wasn't Shizun fretting about not having evidence? You don't need to worry anymore now, do you? No wonder Luo Binghe had fallen asleep for a moment on Zhuya. To think that Shen QingQiu even had thought he was running out of energy. It turned out that at that time he was actively activating his dream powers. Luo Binghe's eyes brimmed with compliments, please. Head plats, please. However, Shen QingQiu was coming down with a headache, wondering what exactly Luo Binghe had crafted in the dream that he distributed. How had he communicated a situation so dire that all these people would scurry to Zhao Hua Monastery for this serious discussion? He didn't even need to ask, as someone else got impatient first. Well, could someone exactly say what this dream was? This person looked familiar. Shen QingQiu thought for a moment and suddenly remembered. Well, wasn't it that person from Wanhua City that... What sect was it again? Oh, the Bai Chi sect. The Bai Chi sect's Da Zhizhong. Master Wu Qin said politely, may we ask this sect leader, what is your cultivation level? Late core formation. The two abbots looked at each other, and quite a few people began to quietly cough. Amidst the silence, Master Wu Qin was the one to hint at what was going unsaid. Well, then that is strange. Within our monastery, everyone with cultivation from core formation and up had the same dream. What he didn't say was that if this fellow really was at late core formation, by all rights he should have had the same dream too. A chorus of agreements came from below. Well, that's right, all the members of our sect below core formation were likewise unaffected last night. Lying about your cultivation to everyone's face. Oh, and being exposed on the spot. Well, this really was lifting a stone and dropping it on your own foot. Shen QingQiu internally lit a candle for this good brother, who still hadn't made it a bit of progress even after so many years. Although, however, that Shizhong's cultivation hadn't advanced much, his face had grown much thicker. He wasn't the least bit embarrassed and instead said in a loud voice, well, there are exceptions to every rule. Just tell us, what exactly was the dream? This Bai Chi sect had such a tyrannical name, yet they were actually without a single core formation cultivator. Otherwise, he wouldn't need to ask about it in front of such an audience. It looked like this guy wasn't here because he'd been invited to the discussion, but simply to get in on the action and make himself known. Wu Wang furrowed his brow, but Master Wu Qin was such a good-natured person, he patiently explained the general outline. The contents of the dream were that Tianlong Jun, who had been sealed under Bailu Mountain, had recrafted a corporal body to unleash a storm of carnage. Though Master Wu Qin was elegant in his words and metaphors, he had redacted some of the contents with Luo Binghe's tastes. The storm of carnage he spoke of would absolutely not have been limited to simply killings and beating. The monk had definitely left out some heavier types of play. Oh, well, oh, damn it! Why is this ending now? Oh, no, damn it! Why can't we have nice things in MXTX? Ah! This is why we can't have nice things in MXTX. These three chapters went by really fast. They went by, I know it took me a long time to read through them, but they felt like it was just thing after thing after thing. Oh man, MXTX at this point is the biggest tease. We're going to talk about it, but she was like, hey, you know, maybe Shen QingQiu was a little wrong about a couple things, and maybe he assumed a couple things. He zigged when he should have zagged, and, you know, now would be a great time for him to, like, communicate with Luo Binghe and remedy these situations, but who wants that to happen? And I'm like, stop it! I was like, damn it, MXTX, how dare you? So, okay, before we dive into and see what all is going on here, I want to go check Reiki's comments about what these chapters are called and go from there, because I'm like, are you kidding me? So, chapter 66, Circle of Nobles, Wanton Disorder. Of course, that's interesting. I think the Circle of Nobles is interesting. It's a weird title. That one's a little bit, wouldn't be necessarily a spoiler. A 3-man journey, chapter 67. Yeah, Tianlong Jun is convinced that Shen QingQiu just likes threesomes. And I was like, he's not beating the allegations. So, what do we do with that? And then chapter 68 is in Zhao Hua Temple. So, oh, damn. Okay. That's all we got. That's not as spoilery as it's been in the past, but oh my God. So there's a lot going on. There is. And Shen QingQiu, we're not ready to count out any of these. The fact that the B points aren't updating except monthly now because the story is just too lazy. I'm like, is this like a byproduct of it being by airplane shooting towards the sky where the systems gave up? They're like, oh, we can't keep up with all these B points. We're just going to update it monthly and then it's going to be through the roof, I'm sure. What's interesting is the system, we've talked about unreliable narrators and about how there's certain things that aren't revealed until they're revealed in this story. Like Shen QingQiu does that in this, where we don't find out about this whole Yu Qinyan thing that could possibly make him suspicious again until now. And I'm like, wait, what? Which we'll get to that when we get to it. But just as Shen QingQiu is only revealing information to us on a need-to-know basis, now the system reveals being like, yeah, you could have accessed that jade necklace, except you couldn't have used it because he hadn't earned enough B points. So there's that. And it's like, wait, what? So basically what would have happened is Shen QingQiu would have been like, yes, I want to use the jade pendant to get rid of Luo Binghe's anger points. And the system would have been like, no. You don't have enough, so you gotta do the scene pusher instead. What a bitch. What a way to torture him. So now he has access to it. He has to get it. He has to get the jade necklace on his person. Again, the system, I think, in the long run, is trying to help Shen QingQiu. It's just not in the most efficient or correct way possible. So I think that he will get the jade pendant. I don't know about the binding rope. We still have that to worry about. And then he's going to have to use it at some point. So that's good. At least he'll have it on his person where he can easily access it if needed. But he does bring up a good point. He's like, well, Luo Binghe actually seems pretty okay right now. Is his anger points going to be needed to be cajoled by this pendant or not? I think that's going to come down to one of two things. I don't know if the anger points and the heartbreak points can be intermingled and saved by the jade pendant. But also, at the end of the day, here's my other thought that's just like popped up into my head. At the end of the day, Shen QingQiu is going to eventually need to stop treating Luo Binghe like a novel character and like an actual person, which is what is slowly starting to happen in this chapter, in these chapters. So it may come down to it where he has this item, he no longer is going to use it to benefit himself, but to help Luo Binghe and benefit him without any reward to Shen QingQiu. Because in the past, Shen QingQiu has been hoarding these items, being like, hey, this will save my life one day. I'm going to need it, you know, just in case to win Luo Binghe over if it comes down to it. But now he's starting to, like, actually communicate with Luo Binghe, and they're treating each other like people and not characters in a book, even though there is that weird, we're going to talk about that whole breakfast scene. I had weird vibes about it, but it was just mainly Luo Binghe sucking up because he knew he did something. He's like, don't be mad at me. It's like, But my point is that I think that what's going to happen is Luo Binghe is going to use the jade pendant, but it's not going to be to get rid of the anger points. It's not going to be to save himself. He's going to realize that Luo Binghe needs this jade pendant. regardless of what it means for Shen QingQiu, and he's going to give it back. And it's going to end up like solidifying their relationship as people and not as characters in a book. I don't know. I could be wrong. That's just the route I'm getting it wrong, because he brings up a good point. He's like, well, I'm not going to need it anymore. So he's just going to have to give it because he wants to give it, not for a specific purpose. So yeah, so I love Liu QingGe. I do. I feel bad for Liu QingGe a lot because I think he's developed this crush on Shen QingQiu. He's developed a crush. He doesn't know what to do with it. And he's like, but he also kind of suggests that he's like, are you gay? Is this a thing? And Shen QingQiu's like, what? I don't think, why would you think that? And we're going to talk about that scene in the hotel room. I think that Liu QingGe possibly has a crush on Shen QingQiu, but it's not going to, he's going to be like the Zhang Chang of this series, where he's just going to be like, it doesn't get met, right? And maybe he doesn't like, I don't think Liu QingGe loves Shen QingQiu like Luo Binghe loves him. He brings up some good points, which we'll talk about in this chapter set, but I do feel kind of bad for him because in the end, I think he's just going to end up having to move on without Shen QingQiu, because MXTX is clearly setting up Shen QingQiu and Luo Binghe to be together. It just kind of sucks for Liu QingGe. But hey, think of it, you have to think of it this way. Liu QingGe died in the original version, so hey, at least you're still alive, right? God, this chapter set was great. So they managed to get away, and so we need to go back on that. I like the fact that poor Shen QingQiu, the bad luck of Shen QingQiu. Shen QingQiu's like, hey, don't swallow any of that demon blood. And Liu QingGe's like, why? My sword's like swatted away. I'm totally fine. And Shen QingQiu's like, I had one droplet enter my mouth from a random bird, and you've had hundreds of beasts go at you, and you're perfectly fine. Okay, just the worst luck. Like Liu QingGe is perfectly fine, and Shen QingQiu has the worst luck, right? But he's like, just keep fighting, don't mind me. So Tianlong Jun is interesting because he's kind of like this passive aggressive villain. He's so assured in himself that he's going to get what he wants that he doesn't get overly flustered or mad, which is quite the opposite of Luo Binghe. He's just like, I guess things will work out. Even if he's slightly irritated, he gets over it rather quickly. And he's like, oh yeah, Shen, you're here. And then of course activates the blood mites. Now, Shen QingQiu drags Zhu Xilong into the tent and has this conversation where he's like, you're trying to help me, but your idea of help is not exactly what I want. So you need to stop that. And of course, I do feel for Zhu Xilong too, because he's like, Zhu Xilong is just literally, we talked about it in the intro, he's just got like the default character trait of loyalty. And this flat character, it's like a flat character that's been assigned one character trait is trying to become a round character that's three-dimensional. But because there's just this one character trait, the way that in which it has to be exaggerated and extrapolated upon to make him three-dimensional is done so in a very weird way, like, killing people. And I'm like, what? So he's like, I'm just trying to help. And Shen QingQiu's like, well, your methods are a bit, problematic. And so Zhu Xilong's like, since the four major sects use these lowly methods to besiege and entrap you, they have to pay. My lord said that. So no single person can be spared. And then Shen QingQiu's like, wait a minute. And it's like everything from volume 2, when he was going back and being like, wait, when we were at Huanhua Palace, you showed up to infiltrate. I didn't put 2 and 2 together what you were doing, and then you saved me. What were you doing while you were there? And that's when he's like, he talks about rescuing him, and Shen QingQiu's like, do you remember Gong Yi Zhao? And he's like, oh, that disciple. He's like, yeah, I thought he looked like Luo Binghe, but then I found out that he wasn't Luo Binghe, and so he was the guy that was in the cave with you, so I just killed him on the way out. I'd really hoped in my mind that Gong Yi Zhao was going to be alive, like secretly, because it was so weird. Like, you knew MXTX was withholding information for a reason. You kept on being like, well, what about Gong Yi Zhao? And he's not mentioned. And then you're like, but something happened. What was it? And what we come to find out was that Zhu Xilong is the one that killed Gong Yi Zhao and the Huanhua Palace members, not Luo Binghe. And it's like, oh. Now, again, we talked back in volume 2, you know, why didn't Luo Binghe speak up and defend himself? But Luo Binghe was bound and determined that Shen QingQiu wasn't going to believe him and it wasn't going to make a difference, and he didn't know the answers. So it all makes sense now why he didn't speak up. And because that was one of my biggest things against Luo Binghe was, well, he killed Gong Yizhao. And now you feel bad because you're like, oh no, he actually didn't kill Gong Yizhao. Why he didn't defend himself, not important anymore. It's like, oh, about that. Damn it. So yeah. And the way that Shen QingQiu's like, I blamed him for all of this, and this would happen. And the crazy thing about it is that Gong Yizhao, he did possibly like have the potential to have a crush on Shen QingQiu as part of the harem, and now that's been canceled out. I don't want Liu QingGe to die because he possibly has a crush on Shen QingQiu. I hope that doesn't happen, but I wouldn't be surprised if by the end of this novel series, if Liu QingGe, like, he still harbors this crush on Shen QingQiu, but he understands that he's going to be with Luo Binghe even if he doesn't agree with it. And I could see him as like a character who like looks Luo Binghe and is like, hey, if you ever slip up, I'm getting in this. And Luo Binghe's like, that'll never happen. Or something like that. I could totally see that being the case. It's interesting because of all the MXTX stories, this is the one, and it's the first one, which makes it the most interesting, that it's the one where you kind of almost wonder if Shen QingQiu ends up with someone other than Luo Binghe. At this point, I don't think that's going to happen, but it leads you to believe that it's a possibility throughout the novel series that Shen QingQiu might go with Gong Yizhao. He might go with Liu QingGe if Luo Binghe doesn't, you know, get on terms with him. So that's interesting to me. But yeah, and you can't even really be mad at Zhu Xilong. That's what Shen QingQiu is so upset about. He's like, I can't even really be mad at him because to Zhu Xilong, he was just doing a simple thing. I'm protecting Shen QingQiu, and that means getting rid of anybody in my way. And Zhu Xilong was and Gong Yizhao was in my way. So that's what I did. And Shen QingQiu's like, well, son of a bitch, I was wrong. And he's just like, you know what? And at that point, Shen QingQiu saying, you know, it's better to be with one lunatic than with two. At least one of them listens to him. He's like, at least I'm not with Zhu Xilong, who misunderstands and goes way above and beyond in the worst way possible. And I'm not with his dad, who's like messed up on a whole different level. He's like, I'll take Luo Binghe. Of the 3 lunatics, I'll take Luo Binghe. We'll be fine there. That'll be fine. And what gets me is that Zhu Xilong, he still maintains that loyalty. He's like, you know, I just wanted to treat the people who helped me. Is there something wrong with that? And Shen QingQiu's like, well, the problem is what you think you're doing is treating me well, but I don't think the same. He's like, you think you're helping, but it's not. That's the problem. And I love that he's like, you know what? I'd rather be in pain and suffering than deal with this. And he's like, even if Master Shen meets a miserable end, you'd still go to Luo Binghe. And Shen QingQiu's like, I'm not even going to bother accepting that conversation. And then Zhu Xilong's like, fine, okay. I give respect to Zhu Xilong, who's misunderstood and misunderstands the situations. This family, I tell you. But he ends up helping Shen QingQiu because he likes him. And it's like, I feel like the same thing's going to happen with Liu QingGe, where Zhu Xilong likes Shizun, but respects him being with Luo Binghe and respects him enough to, you know, help him regardless. I feel like Liu QingGe is going to be the human equivalent of that, the cultivator equivalent. And that he's not going to understand why Shizun wants to be with Luo Binghe, but he's going to respect it in the end. Go figure. So yeah, and of course, I like Tian Longjun's like, what are you doing? I like Tian Longjun doesn't get mad and punish Zhu Xilong. He's just like, look at you, being so kind. Like, what? I can't, it's hard. As much as Tian Longjun is like trying to merge the realms and doing this end all be all into the world stuff, it's kind of hard to be totally mad at him because he's like, so like, oh, well, we'll get Shizun to like, we'll get Shen QingQiu to come with us one way or another. Don't you worry. Like, he's not malicious. Like, he's just, it's weird. He's not malicious to the point where he's like the old palace master, but he's just kind of like, just evil, not lawful evil, not chaotic evil. He's just evil. But it's so like, eh. We're going to talk about Yu Qingwan here in just a second. And I'm like, book, how dare you? How dare you? I feel like I've been gaslit. We're going to go back to that, but we're not there yet. So we're going to just put that aside. I'm like, is Tianlong Jun the enemy of all enemies? Maybe not. Yeah, we're going to get back into it. Anyway, so they all end up flying away. I'm really glad that Shen QingQiu grabbed Luo Binghe, because for a hot second, if this had been volume 2, Shen QingQiu would have left him. He would have left him, and then Luo Binghe would have been like staring up with puppy dog eyes into the distance like, what did I do, Shizun? I tried to protect you. But at this point, Shen QingQiu knows, 1, Luo Binghe has come to protect him and save him, so he's got to respect that. 2, he's been wrong about Luo Binghe and blaming him for things he ended up not doing multiple times now. So he's like, gah. And he's like, if I leave him, that's doing me no good. And he's like, that's not fair to him. So he grabs a hold of him and gets him on his sword. I love that. I love the them all running away and the blood beast just instantly melting back into blood. I like that, again, he looks at Zhu Xilong, he's like, you just let him go? And he's like, you went to all that trouble, but you didn't appreciate it one bit. You just rushed down the road to ruin. Well, I sympathize for you. I'm like, I feel kind of bad. Like, he's trying to merge these worlds together and not necessarily considering how bad it's going to impact the human realm, possibly. But then he looks at Zhu Xilong and he's like, oh, don't worry, he'll come around. I'm like, it's so bizarre. He's like, I never imagined to think that Peak Lord Shen likes it with more people. Does there need to be 3 every time? And Zhu Xilong doesn't say anything. I'm like, Zhu Xilong, what? You going to speak up and say you didn't have a threesome? You going to tell him that? No? Okay. Like, just, oh my God. This Lord had probably been reading those strange illustrated pamphlets from the human realm again. Okay. So the strange illustrated pamphlets from the human realm again. We talk about the novels and everything. There are these pamphlets. We're going to bring them back up again. That is Shen QingQiu and Luo Binghe. Maybe it's not necessarily them, but is it porn? We're going to bring that up again. Because it's going to come up again in this hotel room scene. But we're all going to tie it together. So I like that Liu QingGe, one thing I really like about his character is he's very straightforward most of the time. He's very much like, just get to the bottom of this. Why are you doing this? Like, why are you two together? And Shen QingQiu, who's slowly coming around to realizing he's like, I've been wrong about Luo Binghe. I don't want to assume anything. He's like, there are reasons. Of course, Luo Binghe, the first thing Luo Binghe attaches to that is Shizun didn't deny it, which he didn't. So we need to put this over here with Shen QingQiu. So Shen QingQiu's feeling a lot of things. He's feeling a little bit of guilt for blaming Luo Binghe and misunderstanding him and not hearing him out. He's feeling a little bit bad about it. And he, doesn't mind, he doesn't mind Luo Binghe when he's not being maniacal. Luo Binghe, meanwhile, is a freaking little gremlin. He's a troll. He is a gremlin. No. He is worse than Wei Wuxian. He is such a gremlin because he is very pleased right now that his Shizun, that Shen QingQiu, is okay with him. I'm like, here's my thing. I talk about relating to Shen QingQiu a lot. And here's how I feel. I feel like Shen QingQiu, one of the things that he originally liked about Luo Binghe, which we're going to tie back to, is Luo Binghe's badassery. And him being kind of the bad boy in fiction. Something I really hardcore relate to Shen QingQiu is that, in this chapter set really illustrates it, is that Shen QingQiu in fiction likes a bad boy, right? He liked Luo Binghe in Proud Immortal Demon Way because he was very like dominant and very like just manly man that just like, here's how it's going to be and this is what I'm going to do. And Shen QingQiu, Shen Yan was all about it. He was like, oh, awesome. I love this character. So we're going to talk about that when we get to the hotel room. We're going to talk about the whole thing. And that is just subverting and creating all of this discussion, but we're not there yet. But I relate to Shen Yan in the sense that he likes in fiction a bad boy. When I was growing up, I liked a bad boy in fiction. Jareth, the Goblin King in Labyrinth. Raphael, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. I was all about a bad boy. And I was like, yes, Gargoyles, Goliath. I was like, give me a bad boy. I can take it. I can take an anti-hero. Shadow and Sonic the Hedgehog. Sure. Right. Great. I like an anti-hero all about it, growing up. But in real life, a bad boy in fiction is not necessarily the same in real life. Right. So for Shen QingQiu, he's figuring out that how Luo Binghe acts as the bad boy as an actual person. He's like, now hold on, we gotta straighten some things out. You need to communicate, you need to explain yourself. So it in fiction, that stereotype seems appealing on paper, but when you actually get it in the flesh as a character, it's a lot more complicated and it can be frustrating. And that's kind of what Shen QingQiu is dealing with, is his own preference versus interacting with it in real life. So God. So Luo Binghe, I love that Luo Binghe, whenever Liu QingGe is like, hey, you need to get away from him, Shen QingQiu, he's kind of bad news, come over here. And Luo Binghe is like, shh. He's like instantly like suddenly changes features and gets his hands around Shen QingQiu, being like, no, he's mine. I'm not giving him back to you. And I like that Shen QingQiu is like, this is complicated. Trust me for now. We'll get away. I'll explain this. And I like Liu QingGe saying, I trust you, but not him. Because to be fair to Liu QingGe, the last time he saw Luo Binghe with Shen QingQiu was with a corpse of him in his arms. One can imagine that would be a sight to see, right? And Shen QingQiu, without a moment's hesitation, says, well, I trust him. And he's like, you trusted him before, but how did that end? And what's great is that I wish Shen QingQiu had told him, he's like, hey, I was kind of wrong about that. I did trust him, but I didn't. We've been misunderstanding him. It's been a thing. And so Luo Binghe kind of like stops him. He's like, he says he trusts me and I'll leave it alone. So what got me was Luo Binghe says, oh, I just need to rest my eyes a bit, and falls asleep on Shen QingQiu's forehead. On Shen QingQiu's shoulder, rather. He puts his forehead on his shoulder. And what Luo Binghe has done is Shen QingQiu kind of laments. He's like, look, we don't have any evidence to show the cultivation world that these worlds are being merged. He's like, we need evidence that it's happening. And so Luo Binghe does the dream to get them all together at Zhao Hua Monastery to advance the plot. Now, at this point, he talks about them needing, like, the worlds merging. I want to go back to that because did he tell Luo Binghe that before Luo Binghe activated the dream? I don't think that he did. And so he's like, your cultivation has advanced. Interesting. Let me see here. I wanted to see. He's like, oh, I don't hurt. He's like, well, you don't look so good. And he's like, well, I'll definitely, he's like, he's made a lot of mistakes before, but he won't from now on. I like that Liu QingGe is like, how can we trust him? Like, he's been so erratic these last several chapters, this last volume. How can we trust him? And Shen QingQiu's like, look, that was when he was confused. I was confused. I didn't know the whole situation. Now that I kind of know, I'll be able to handle it. Don't worry. And Liu QingGe is like, you really trust him? He's like, well, I never really genuinely trusted him before, but that was why I kept accidentally hurting him. He's like, I didn't trust him, and so it caused all these problems. He's like, well, maybe if I do trust him, and given the situation that we're in, it might not be a bad idea. Maybe it'll lend some better results, because so far in the past, not trusting him has not really worked. So he's like, I'd rather be optimistic than pessimistic, which is a step for Shen QingQiu. So claps for Shen QingQiu. So he talks about how Liu QingGe has, his cultivation has advanced. I love that whenever Liu QingGe like walks in the hotel, his head's high and he's like got his sword out. He's like, let's go. And he's like, yes, I did exit seclusion. I am stronger. Like, I just loved Liu QingGe with his chin up. Just like, what of it, bitch? Like, I love his character. It's great. And so that's when he talks about what's been happening. So they tried to interrogate Zhao Hua Ling, but I like that Liu QingGe is a little bit of a gentleman. So he's like, he couldn't like interrogate her how they normally do. So that's good to know. And then he talks about running into Shen QingQiu. Shen QingQiu, this bitch, he is going around eating his fill, having the time of his life. Everything's going great. And I'm like, you know, Shen QingQiu has been taken by Tian Longjun and Zhu Xilong, and Luo Binghe went after him. And you were just like, oh, they'll manage. They'll be fine. How dare you, sir? I love that Liu QingGe, like, had no reservations and was going to beat him up, and SQUABBLING hugs his thighs, which is a great parallel to Shen QingQiu at the beginning of the series when he's like, all I gotta do is hug the main protagonist's thighs and not die. Definite parallel, which I'm sure maybe Shen Yan thought that from reading the novel and had that impression. I'm like, oh my God. So then he tells him everything about what Shen QingQiu was eating, what his vital information, he's been taking the southern border. And then Liu QingGe was going to kill Shen QingQiu, which they just kind of, MXTX kind of brushes over that. Like, he was going to kill him. I'm like, you were going to kill the novel author of this whole thing. What? But then Mo Beijun shows up. Now, we know nothing at this point about Shen QingQiu and Mo Beijun's relationship, except that in the original novel, Mo Beijun killed him on Luo Binghe's orders. And they'd been working together with the Demon Realm. So I find it fascinating that in a turn of events, Mo Beijun saves Shen QingQiu from Liu QingGe. Because Liu QingGe, of course, is supposed to be dead, right? And he was going to kill Shen QingQiu for being a traitor. And then Mo Beijun saves him, where in the OG, he kills him. So that's an interesting twist. Now, I personally think that Mo Beijun and Shen QingQiu are going to get together, but this novel has not given us anything to suggest that, so who knows? Maybe we'll get that later on in the novel. Who knows? But he ends up leaving, and after he battles Mo Beijun. Now, Mo Beijun, we don't find out the end result of that battle, only that Liu QingGe gets away. So Liu QingGe is like, I've gone to a lot of trouble to get to you and get all this information. And all Shen QingQiu is like, oh, well, he did a lot of trouble for that, just for one of his sworn brothers. And I'm like, Shen QingQiu, do you not realize that Liu QingGe likes you, and that's why he's doing it? He's the only one that's doing this for a reason. Oh my God. So he's like, well, I have to discuss with you. Okay, so while they're on the swords, that's when he talks about the mountain being sealed. And so it seems like Luo Binghe must have been pretending to be asleep so that, you know, he could hug Shizun and get away with it. But then when they start talking about needing actual evidence that this has gone on, then that's when Luo Binghe must have gotten the idea of, oh, I know how to help, and then planted the dream in everyone's head. So yeah. He's like, is this possible? And he's like, well, this will have real serious consequences. And Shen QingQiu's like, well, who had gone quiet for a while? He's like, you know, why doesn't Shizun ask me? And Liu QingGe is like, well, what could you do? And Shen QingQiu doesn't know what to say and what to do. He's like, he doesn't want to involve Luo Binghe because in his mind, Luo Binghe has a certain reputation at this point with the other sex. Huanghua Palace is a mess because of him and because of his mismanagement. So he's like, that's not painting a good picture. And he's like, if you go up in front of all the sects, they're likely to ostracize you and point their swords at you, as what happens here. And Shen QingQiu's like, I know how that feels. I don't want you to go through the same thing. The frustrating part is, rather than say that to him and communicate it to him, which we all would like, he's just like, I'm like, Shen QingQiu. Just gently shake. And so that's when Luo Binghe leans on his shoulder and falls asleep and casts the dream. Okay, all this is adding up. All right, this is all making sense now. Okay, these chapters were definitely a series of setup and payoff all in a row. But then there's a lot of setup that hasn't been paid off yet. And I'm like, oh my God, this was definitely like a set of chapters. And I'm like, MXTX, what we doing? And there were no pictures. There were no pictures this set, which was so frustrating. I wanted to see pictures of them inside the hotel room. I wanted to at least see pictures of them in that hotel room scene, but no. So I'm probably gonna have to use the Feral Fandom memes for this week to carry on. Anyway, so they go in the hotel room. At first, I started to get excited because at first I was like, whenever Shen QingQiu's like, okay, Luo Binghe looks like he's tired. He's been through a lot. Let's just stop. Take the day off. I'll spend the night with him. You go on and tell everybody that we're going to go there. And I was like, unintentionally, I'm like, Shen QingQiu, you are setting yourself up to be in a room alone with Luo Binghe. You're setting yourself up, and Luo Binghe is probably just like, and I was like, you bitch, this all set up. He's like, oh, I'm so hurt, and I need to sleep. Can we just get a room, Shizoon, and I'll get better. I'm like, bitch. So he was setting that up, and Shen QingQiu was genuinely being like, oh, well, maybe he needs some help. And Liu QingGe is not falling for it. He's like, no. I know the rumors, and I know how this looks. You're not getting away with this. No. And he like looks at Luo Binghe, I'm sure, like, no, not even for a night. We're gonna all stay together. I love that he just like takes these long steps in the hotel, like, we're gonna get 3 rooms, we're gonna rest, and then we're gonna get back on the road. No funny business. And I was like, and a part of me was like, I kind of wanted Liu QingGe to keep going and leave them. And only because in the last chapter set, we were finally getting Shen QingQiu and Luo Binghe to work together, and it was finally starting to work out. And then we got interrupted. And now that Shen QingQiu knows a little bit more about the situation and that Luo Binghe wasn't at fault for Gong Yizhao's death, it's like, okay, we can even go further. And instead, Liu QingGe is like, well, I'm not going to let you guys have funny business together. And I'm like, I kind of wanted them to at least talk. And if it led to something, maybe it would be consensual, but MXTX is a tease. She's not going to let us have nice things. So the 3-room business was hilarious. Where Liu QingGe is like 3 rooms and Luo Binghe is like 2 rooms. I honestly wanted Shen QingQiu to be like 1 room. Because if Shen QingQiu said 1 room, he would know that nobody would try anything because Liu QingGe would not let Luo Binghe do it. And they would be able to maybe... Here's the problem, though. 1, they wouldn't get any sleep because none of them would sleep because they'd all 3 be looking at each other. And 2, then you couldn't have, as an author, you can't have that set up because then you need Liu QingGe to talk by himself to Shen QingQiu, and you need Luo Binghe to come back to Shen QingQiu by himself later on. So it narratively wasn't going to work, but I'd secretly hoped for it because it would tie into Tian Longjun's theme of, well, I used the blood mites to survey you and noticed that, again, you were in a room with 3 people. And it's like, no! So, missed opportunity, but narratively, I get why it had to happen. But I'm sorry, Luo Binghe set this whole thing up. He set this whole business up when he was like, well, we only have money for 2 rooms. We'd have more money if we only had 1 room if a certain someone wasn't here. He set this whole business up. He made it to where him and Shen QingQiu would have some time alone. And it's like when there's a 3rd wheel on a date and you want that 3rd wheel to go. So you're like, oh, I'm not feeling so good. Hey, would you care to take me home? And I'll talk to y'all. Hey, 3rd wheel, I'll talk to you on Monday, but they're going to take me home. So this is the way it's got to be. We'll talk to you Monday at work. And then these 2 are by themselves and the 3rd wheel leaves. That was the scenario Luo Binghe was trying to do. And Liu QingGe was like, nah, not happening. But then the best part is just the fact that, Luo Binghe is like, well, I'm the only one with money, so this is how it's going to be. And I love that Shen QingQiu's like, okay, you 2 have a room together, bye. Shen QingQiu's like, no. He's like, I am not going to be stuck in a room with either of you because that seems like a horrible idea. So you all just chill out. I'm going to get my own sleep. I can't blame Shen QingQiu. I probably would have done the same. So then there's this point where Shen QingQiu is just like, he says, how, like, he dared to share a room with Luo Binghe. a straight man and a gay one in the same room? That's just asking for death. And then he turns to the readers and says, yes, Shen QingQiu insisted he was still straight. When you have to insist that you're a sexuality, you might call that into question. It's like his willingness to read a stallion novel like Proud Immortal Demon Way was rock solid proof. I'm like, but here's the problem. I think that Shen Yan got attached to Luo Binghe while reading Proud Immortal Demon Way, and I think intuitively, like in his heart of hearts, he kind of hoped that it would become a Don Mai. And then when it didn't, it made him mad because he's like, well, why is he with all these women? Why isn't this happening? What about the monsters? What about this? It's like the staunchest case of denial. And he's not helping his cause by him being like, well, nor did he dare to share a room with Liu QingGe. Though Master Liu was Sangjiang Mountain's #1 straight man over all time and space. So straight, evident to heavens and earth. His straightness as certain as a fact as the light of the sun and moon. I'm like, that's selling it pretty hard. I wonder if Shen QingQiu's like, yeah, he's straight. I mean, he's the straightest person here. So I don't want to share a room with him because, I mean, but then you're like, you won't share a room with Luo Binghe because he's gay, but you won't share a room with Liu QingGe because he's straight. And then he says, if the demonic vinegar vat that was Luo Binghe overturned to sour contents, he would be even harder to deal with. So he's like, if his jealousy at Luo Binghe made him feel a certain way, he'd be hard to deal with. I'm like, are you worried about you rubbing off on Liu QingGe and making him gay as well? Too late. My thing is, I feel like Liu QingGe, you know, whether he's gay or demisexual or whatever, his attraction for Shen QingQiu was like from the beginning. Like Shen QingQiu, you gave batty bat eyelashes at Liu QingGe when you saved him in the cave. It was over from that moment. It's just been snowballing since then. And Shen QingQiu has no idea that that's what's happened. And I'm like, Shen QingQiu at this point is in such denial that he's gay that he doesn't want to even notice all of the obvious signs that he is at this point. It's like, oh my God, look, you gotta figure yourself out, sir. So anyway, when he spots the booklets on the table with gaudy covers that are not, and he couldn't really read the titles, but they were marked with numbers like 1, 2, and 3, he pulled them back against the headboard. He's like, he wasn't even really reading the books, he was just looking at them. He's like, there was text full of ornate prose and sentimental descriptions with exquisite illustrations. And he was about to take a closer look when this system interrupted him. I think that those pamphlets, those books he was looking at are the same ones that Tianlong Jun have been circulating. People have been circulating porn and like explicit novels of him and Luo Binghe. And those were on the table of the hotel. And then when Liu QingGe is about to leave, he looks down, sees that Shen QingQiu has been rummaging through them without realizing Shen QingQiu hasn't read them, and assumes like, oh my God, he is gay. He's just not wanting to tell anybody. And I can't say anything because I might be gay and I don't want to say anything. And it's like, oh my God. Oh my God. So the system notifies him that he can now access the key item, the fake jade Guanyin. He can finally access it, and there's a notification that he's about to have an important quest at Zhao Hua Monastery. And he's like, okay. And so he's like, well, how do I know when items are unlocked based on the satisfaction points? And the system unlocks them without telling him the satisfaction points, but then says, oh, I'll tell you in a month what it is. And he's like, so that's when Liu QingGe comes to visit him. And Liu QingGe doesn't know where Luo Binghe is. Luo Binghe's been getting a lot of shit ready for tomorrow. Don't you worry, because we're going to talk about that in a hot second. But Shen QingQiu is like, what do we do? And I should have brought the fan out, but I don't have it ready. I'll have to get it ready for next week. Liu QingGe gives him the fan, which is another sign that Liu QingGe's been holding on to this fan the whole time to give it back to Shen QingQiu. Okay, Jan. Sure, Jan. You don't have affections for Shen QingQiu? Sure. Okay, fine. But yeah, so he gives him back the fan. And of course, Shen QingQiu's instantly like, I feel so much badass with this fan. I've needed this for my own self-esteem. And so that's when he asks, like, what is up with you and Luo Binghe? I need to know. He's like, do you believe that he's changed his ways? And Shen QingQiu's like, I don't think he's changed his ways. I just think maybe we were wrong about him, or we weren't fully understanding him from the start. And Liu QingGe is like, well, did you see all the stuff he's done? Were those all misunderstandings? But then Shen QingQiu asks about Yu QingYan. Is like, well, is he okay? And he's like, well, has, he been treated well? Was it really Luo Binghe that hurt him? And Liu QingGe is like, well, who else could it have been? Are you looking for excuses? Have you lost your senses? And Shen QingQiu's like, no, I haven't. But now he decides to reveal to us that something isn't adding up. And now it's really not adding up. So he brings up the fact that in the OG novel, Liu QingGe's been dead, so he wouldn't know. But in the OG version, that Yu QingYan, he did fight Luo Binghe in the past, but he never beat him. He had not once gotten the better of the sect leader. And in the end, Luo Binghe had to use Shen QingQiu to drive him to his death, pierced by all these arrows. Now, two things come from that. Suddenly, two things come up from that. Because we knew Shen QingQiu in the original killed Yu QingYan, right? We've known that from the start of the novel. So actually, three things come up. One, could it be that this Yu QingYan is also someone that transmigrated and took over his body and knows about Shang Qinghua and knows about Shen QingQiu and is trying to manipulate the story to get revenge upon both Luo Binghe and Shen QingQiu? Could it be another transmigrator that's trying to alter the story and get revenge on both of them and do it unsuspectingly? That's a possibility. Who's to say that it's not, right? And then two, the idea that Yu QingYan, it is suspicious that he never once lost him in the past, but now he did. I'm like, is he, again, trying to get revenge on Luo Binghe? Or is he a secret, because in the original novel, he dies. So could he have been kind of like Tianlong Jun, like a secret antagonist? And then in the original book, Shang Qinghua decided to kill him off before things got crazy. We need Shang Qinghua to give us answers, and the bitch ain't giving us answers yet. So it's like, okay, Shen QingQiu needs to go ask Shen Airplane about what's going on with this. But also three, the idea that Luo Binghe used Shen QingQiu, teamed up with him to kill Yu QingYan. He used the original flavor to drive him to his horrific death, pierced by 10,000 arrows. In both the original and in this world, he had treated Shen QingQiu unusually well. He had been perplexed by that since early in the novel. Why did the great sect leader of righteous sect bestow such favor on a scum villain? Were there undiscovered hidden depths in their relationship? Would this be one of the plot holing responsibilities? Well, the answer is yes. So it's like in the OG, apparently he treated him well also. So why? Why was he treating him so nicely? And why did Shang Qinghua? Is the fact of Yu QingYan treating him so well, does that have something to do with what maybe Airplane Shooting Towards the Sky originally had planned for the novel? And then he tweaked it and changed it and just killed Yu QingYan off because it wasn't necessary anymore and he didn't want to have a plot hole any bigger than it already was? But the fact that Luo Binghe used Shen QingQiu, I'm like, did they have initially more of a relationship than was planned? And it was just all changed to be in favor of it being a stallion novel and him having all these harem wives? There is something with this part of the story that we're just now finding out that I'm like, wait a minute. this whole thing with Liu QingGe, why we need to know more. And MXTX is like, it's just this one thing. You might just find out later. I don't know. I swear, though, if it comes to terms that Liu QingGe is one of the secret villains of this whole novel, and I called it from the start, and you all sat there and gaslit me and was like, oh, what? Oh, Romania, why would you think that he's a deer officer, he's a teddy bear, why would you suspect him? You're just using your knowledge of other MXTX stories to fuel this opinion. If it turns out I was right this whole time, and he's a secret baddie, I will flip out my fan and be like, I told you so, you bitches. But maybe I'm wrong, because this story is all about miscommunication, misunderstanding, and reading things the wrong way and not getting to the root of things. And Shen QingQiu is trying to finally get to the root of things, because he's like, I've been assuming a lot over the course of the story, and I need to stop assuming and start getting some actual answers. So, I don't know. The whole Liu QingGe thing, especially when they show up at the Zhao Hua Monastery, and Liu QingGe is like telling him like, hey, Shen QingQiu's here. And he's like, oh, that seems suspicious. So all this is suspicious. I'm telling you. So Liu QingGe is trying to figure this out. Or Shen QingQiu is trying to figure this out, and Liu QingGe takes it the wrong way. And he's like, why are you so good to Luo Binghe? And then he says, I love the way that MXTX describes this with like the candlelight reflecting off Liu QingGe's beautiful pale face. He's like, are the rumors true? And Shen QingQiu is like, why are you believing gossip? Why are you even wanting to gossip? This isn't like you. Because he likes you. And he's like, do you believe in that baseless hearsay? And Liu's like, well, I don't. I just don't know why you're defending that traitor. And Shen QingQiu's like, I'm not defending him. I just don't want to get the wrong assumption. I'm tired of assuming things. And Liu QingGe is like, well, I don't understand. He's like, things may change, but fundamental nature is difficult to change. Luo Binghe is no good news, and you need to watch out for yourself. And at that point, Liu QingGe is like, he's a bad boy and a delinquent. And Shen QingQiu's like, I know he's a bad boy, but I don't think he's evil. It's like, Shen QingQiu's like, I know he's a bad boy and a delinquent, but does he have a heart of gold? We gotta find this out. So then as he's getting ready to walk away, that's when he looks at the table, and Liu QingGe is like Shen QingQiu is not beating the convictions, basically. So here's what happens. Next morning, I thought this was all a dream sequence. I thought this whole thing for a second was a dream sequence, because it was like, what are we doing? But it all makes sense now. It's not a dream sequence. Luo Binghe is in white robes, his hair neatly done up in a little ribbon, and he's just getting breakfast ready, being like, oh, Shen QingQiu, Shizun, don't be mad at me, but I may have done something that's advancing the plot, but don't you be mad at me. Here's breakfast. Am I just like what you want? He is sucking up to Shen QingQiu, so that when Shen QingQiu finds out that he gave everybody a dream and set up these things at the Zhao Hua Monastery, he won't be mad at him. Is basically it. He's like, don't be mad at me, Shizun. I'm trying to do good. Right? Here's the interesting thing. At first, I love that they just marked out this line, because, you know, Shen QingQiu doesn't want us, the audience, to know like, oh, he's this model of a flawless, pure disciple of a major sect, the image of a pretty, diligent, and competent young wife. It really was something. But Shen QingQiu feels kind of bad about it, because what Luo Binghe is doing is he presents himself as he believes Shen QingQiu wants him to, which is as the little housewife. Now, I think MXTX does a really interesting thing with gender subversion and gender expectations, because, yeah, Shen QingQiu is like, this whole situation is how it was back at the bamboo house. He's like, if the setting were to change back to the bamboo house, he would have this terrifying misconception of time going backwards. And he's like, oh my gosh. He's like, yeah, back then, Shen QingQiu was just sitting there as Luo Binghe waited on him hand and foot and folded the laundry and made the breakfast and did all of these things that are traditionally stereotyped as a wife's duty. And what's interesting is that Shen QingQiu's like, this doesn't feel right. He's like, this doesn't feel like Luo Binghe. And he's like, well, I always chased after you calling Shizun, but I was afraid it was just one-sided. And Shen QingQiu's like, well, can't you have some backbone and stand up for yourself? He's like, you were the top shelf stallion protagonist who once stood before a harem saying, I do have this many women and I'm going to have more, so deal with it or get lost. He's like, who is this pure-hearted young man who serves tea and carries water and washes and folds clothes for someone who bashfully speaks when his back is turned? He's like, who's possessing your body? And the thing about it is, you know, just like people in real life, you can be a complex character and be both. You can be this loud and proud person, but also be someone that does housework and cooks and cleans. You can be both. You can be a badass and also be a homemaker. There's nothing saying you can't be one or the other. But I think what Shen QingQiu is worried about is that he's afraid that how Luo Binghe is presenting himself is how Luo Binghe thinks Shizun wants. And Shen QingQiu's like, I just want you to be yourself. If you're a badass, be a badass. That's what I like about you. I like about your character that you're unapologetic and you're kind of like a bad boy. And I like that about you because I'm not. Shen Yan is like, I'm not a bad boy. So I'm kind of attracted to you because you are. It's like opposites attract. He's like, so don't be something that you're not. He's like, I found comfort and complacency in you being this little white lotus, but I actually just want you to be yourself and quit trying to put on this false persona. And if you are yourself, he's like, that's what I want. And it's just MXTX, how dare you? Anyway, so he's like, well, you know, you need to go give a proper apology to Liu QingGe. He's like, well, and I like that Luo Binghe is like, oh, there's no need for us to return to the mountain. He's like, what did you say? And he's like, you know, we just need to go to Zhao Hua Monastery. And he's like, and it sounded like he was an NPC. And I was like, is this a dream? Because it sounds like he's just offering up this quest. But then Liu QingGe arrives and is like, no, we got to go there now. There's stuff going on. And we find out that Luo Binghe orchestrated all of this to help Shizun to get his point across. And he's like, are you kidding me? And he's like, all these sects are getting ready to go. And I like that Liu QingGe just ignores Luo Binghe and how he looks. He's just like, I'm not even going to say anything. I'm not even going to address it. We're not going to have this, whatever. Meh. But yeah, so I feel like in the future, Shen QingQiu is going to be like, look, neither of us, he's like, I know you're good at cooking and you're good at doing chores. That's really nice. I'm glad you do it. I don't like doing it. So cool. But just because you're doing those things for me, and that's really great, please don't think that you have to settle and not be yourself. You can be your badass self and make me dinner later. It's fine. I need them to have that conversation. And I don't think they're going to have that conversation until later. I'm like, So anyway, they managed to show up at Zhao Hua Monastery. The Huanhua Palace is not really there because they don't have a good reputation anymore. And luckily, because Luo Binghe looks so different in the white robes, nobody immediately recognizes him. And two, because Shen QingQiu hasn't been seen in several years, nobody immediately recognizes him. Now, if he sees Ming Fan and Ning Yingying, we're in trouble. But Liu QingGe goes on ahead to go tell Liu QingYang that they're coming. And that's when they talk about the dream. And he's like, this was your doing. He's like, this was all Luo Binghe. He set all this up. And they talk about having this dream about Tianlongjun being sealed in the mountain and has been recrafted a corporal body to unleash the storm of carnage. And Shen QingQiu's like, well, that's putting it mildly. He's going to be doing a lot. if you don't realize it through and through. So here we are. We're at Zhao Hua Monastery. We're here. I like that they point out the one guy's incompetence by saying, well, if you aren't a cultivation level, you wouldn't have had this dream to begin with. I like that they took a time to do that. But so they're there. Everyone's gathered. Like in the cover here, everyone's gathered. Shen QingQiu is standing side by side with Luo Binghe. And Luo Binghe has set it up where he's like, look, it's the polar opposite of Jinlan City, which they fly over. I wish they'd gone and seen it, but they fly over it, and it's the polar opposite of that. Where now, instead of Jinlan City, where QingQiu was being thrown under the rug and being ostracized, now Luo Binghe has set it up to where there's a good possibility that Shen QingQiu can plead his case. The question is, him pleading his case and saying there's a problem, what's going to be the result of it? Is Yu Qingyan going to reveal himself as a baddie in these next couple chapters because things aren't going to go the way that he wants? Or is anybody going to believe him? Are they going to believe Shen QingQiu? Are they going to lump him with Luo Binghe as an outcast? What are we going to do about that? So, damn it. I hate waiting a week. Especially now that this is all going on. How dare? How dare? But we are technically at this point halfway through the reactions for Volume 3. I have 10 reactions set for Volume 3, and this was the 5th for Volume 3. So next week, we're going to be looking at chapters 69 through 71 for this series. We've got several more weeks where we're doing 3 chapters, and then the last 2 weeks will be 2 chapters. So, but there's a lot of page numbers to go through, so fun times. But yeah, we're going to be looking at chapters 69 through 71 next week, which is exciting. I never know with MXTX what to expect, and this story goes a different direction every time. So, will Shen QingQiu be there? He should be, unless he's off with Mobei-jun somewhere. He should be, unless he shows up with Mobei-jun and causes a muck, because Mobei-jun is a demon, and so is Luo Binghe, and that could all break out and be chaos. I don't know. But we'll just have to wait and see. So, in the meantime, I'm excited to hear your comments down below. I hope you all have a wonderful week. Please stay safe, take care, and yeah, I'll be back next time with more Scum Villain Self-Saving System. Bye!